The rejection letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered to a cramped studio apartment in Virginia Beach, where the sound of naval aircraft overhead had become white noise. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres sat at her kitchen table, still in her running gear from her 5 a.m. workout, and read the words that would reshape the trajectory of her life. After careful consideration of your performance during Basic Underwater Demolition (SEAL) BUD-S training, we regret to inform you that you will not be continuing with Class 347. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The letter continued with bureaucratic language about alternative opportunities within Naval Special Warfare and Distinguished Service Record. But Rachel's eyes had already moved past the words to stare out her single window at the gray Atlantic morning. Somewhere in the distance, her former classmates were probably preparing for another day of Hell Week, while she faced the reality that her dream of becoming the Navy's first female SEAL had ended not with glory, but with a medical evaluation that deemed her unfit for continued training due to chronic stress fractures. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had outlasted 847 of the original 850 candidates who had started the program. She had endured the freezing surf torture, the endless physical punishment, the psychological warfare designed to break even the strongest minds. She had proven herself against men who outweighed her by 60 pounds, matched their times and distance, swimming, and exceeded many of their scores in marksmanship and tactical awareness. But her bones, pushed beyond their limits by months of relentless training on a frame that carried 128 pounds, instead of the typical 180 plus of her male counterparts, had finally betrayed her. The stress fractures in her shins and feet, initially masked by adrenaline and sheer determination, had worsened until even she couldn't hide the pain that shot through her legs with each step. The program requirements are non-negotiable, the lead instructor had told her during her final evaluation, his weathered face showing something that might have been regret. "You've got the heart, Torres. Hell, you've got more heart than half the men who've walked through here. But the mission comes first, and we can't have operators who might break down when the team needs them most." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rachel folded the letter precisely, her hand steady despite the tremor of disappointment that ran through her core. At 28, she had already served 8 years in the Navy, working her way up from enlisted sonar technician to officer through a combination of natural ability and relentless self-improvement. The SEAL program had been her ultimate goal, the culmination of years of preparation that had consumed every aspect of her life. Now, sitting in an apartment that felt more like a temporary barracks than a home, she faced a future that suddenly seemed undefined. The Navy had offered her several positions: a role in intelligence analysis, a teaching position at the Naval Academy, even a transfer to Naval Criminal Investigative Service. All respectable careers that would utilize her skills and experience. None that appealed to the part of her that had driven her to attempt the impossible in the first place. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister, Maria, back in El Paso. "How's training going? Mom keeps asking when you'll be home for a visit." Rachel stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How do you explain that the thing you've built your entire identity around has just collapsed? That the person you thought you were becoming no longer exists? Instead of answering, she pulled on a jacket and headed out for another run. Despite the protests from her still healing legs, the Virginia Beach boardwalk stretched before her, populated by early morning joggers and dogwalkers who had no idea that the woman running past them had just watched her life's ambition dissolve as she ran. Rachel's mind wandered to the conversation she'd had with her father the night before she'd left for SEAL training. Eduardo Torres had been a Marine sniper in Vietnam, a quiet man who spoke more through actions than words. He had never pushed her toward the military, but when she'd announced her intention to attempt SEAL training, he had simply nodded and said, "The hardest targets are the ones worth taking." 3 miles into her run, Rachel realized she was crying. Not the dramatic sobs of someone overcome by emotion, but the steady, silent tears of someone processing loss. She had spent months preparing for the possibility of failure during training. The statistics were brutal, with success rates hovering around 15% even for the most qualified candidates. But she had never truly prepared for the reality of what came after. The next few weeks passed in a haze of administrative processing and medical evaluations. Rachel went through the motions of exploring her options, meeting with career counselors and reviewing potential assignments. Her body healed, the stress fractures gradually knitting back together. But something else remained broken. It was during a routine visit to the base commissary that she encountered Commander Sarah Mackenzie, a woman whose reputation in Naval Special Warfare preceded her. Mackenzie had been one of the first women to serve in direct combat roles and had later transitioned to training and development roles within the special operations community. "Torres," Mackenzie called out, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "Heard you gave those boys in Buddies a run for their money." Rachel straightened instinctively, though they were both in civilian clothes. "Yes, ma'am. Though not quite far enough." Mackenzie studied her with sharp gray eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. "Walk with me," she said, steering them toward the parking lot. "I've been following your progress. Your instructors speak highly of your tactical acumen and marksmanship scores. The medical setback doesn't erase that." They paused beside Mackenzie's vehicle, a nondescript sedan that somehow looked official despite bearing no military markings. "There are other ways to serve, Torres. Other missions that need someone with your particular skill set." "I've heard the recruitment speeches, ma'am. Intelligence analysis, training roles, administrative positions. All valuable, but not what I signed up for." Mackenzie smiled, the expression transforming her stern features. "I'm not talking about sitting behind a desk. There's a program, relatively new, that operates in the spaces between traditional military operations and civilian law enforcement. Protective details for high-value targets, threat assessment, counter-surveillance. It requires someone who can think like special operations but operate in a civilian environment." Rachel felt a flicker of interest despite herself. "What kind of program?" "The kind that doesn't officially exist in any organizational chart. The kind that needs people who've proven they can handle pressure and make split-second decisions. With leaves on the line." Mackenzie handed her a plain business card with only a phone number printed on it. "If you're interested in actually making a difference rather than pushing papers, call that number. Ask for Agent Morrison." Before Rachel could respond, Mackenzie was getting into her car. "One more thing, Torres," she called through the window. "Failure isn't falling down, it's staying down. The question is whether you're going to get back up and find another way to fight." That evening, Rachel sat in her apartment staring at the business card, turning it over in her hands like a talisman. Outside, the sounds of Virginia Beach continued: traffic, aircraft, the distant crash of waves against the shore. Normal sounds of a normal world that suddenly felt like it might have room for her after all. She thought about her father's words regarding the hardest targets. Perhaps the target she'd been aiming for had simply shifted. Perhaps the mission she was meant to complete required a different approach than the one she'd originally planned. At precisely 9 p.m., Rachel dialed the number on the card. A voice answered on the second ring, professional but warm. "Agent Morrison. This is Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres. Commander Mackenzie suggested I call." "Ah, Torres. Yes, Sarah mentioned you might be in touch. I understand you're at something of a crossroads in your career." "You could say that." "Good. The best operators are the ones who've had to overcome setbacks. Builds character and perspective that you can't get from a textbook. Morrison's voice carried the hint of an accent Rachel couldn't quite place. Are you free for a meeting? Tomorrow? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Something that might interest someone with your particular background and recent experiences. Rachel looked around her sparse apartment, at the stack of Navy paperwork on her table, and the half-packed boxes that represented her uncertain future. I'm free. Excellent. There's a coffee shop called Harbor Lights on Atlantic Avenue. Do you know it? I can find it. 10 a.m. I'll be the woman in the corner booth reading the Washington Post. Come alone. And Torres? Yes? Don't bring any official identification. This is an unofficial conversation between two people who might have mutual interests. The line went dead, leaving Rachel staring at her phone with more questions than answers. She had no idea what Agent Morrison represented or what kind of opportunity she was about to walk into. But for the first time since receiving her discharge papers from SEAL training, she felt something other than disappointment. She felt curious. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with the kind of sharp Atlantic wind that cut through even the heaviest jacket. Rachel arrived at Harbor Lights 15 minutes early, a habit ingrained by years of military punctuality, and surveilled the location from across the street. The coffee shop appeared normal busy enough to provide cover for conversation, with sightlines that allowed observation of approaches from multiple directions. Agent Morrison was already there, exactly as described, though her appearance was more civilian professional than Rachel had expected. Mid-40s, auburn hair, wearing a well-tailored suit that suggested government employment without screaming federal agent. She looked up as Rachel approached, gesturing to the seat across from her. Coffee's good here, Morrison said without preamble. The kind of place where people mind their own business. Rachel sat, accepting the offered cup with hands that were steadier than she felt. What exactly is it that we're discussing, Agent Morrison? Call me Diana. And what we're discussing is whether you're interested in continuing to serve your country in a capacity that might better utilize your specific talents. Diana leaned back slightly, her posture relaxed but alert. Tell me, Rachel, may I call you Rachel? What do you know about executive protection? Basic concepts. Keep the principal safe. Control the environment. Neutralize threats before they develop. Why? Because there's a significant gap in current protective services for high-level government officials. Most close protection details are excellent at what they do, deterring threats, controlling crowds, managing logistics. But they're designed around the assumption any serious threat will come from criminals or foreign operatives. Using conventional approaches. Diana paused to sip her coffee, her eyes never leaving Rachel's face. What they're not prepared for is the kind of threat that requires unconventional response. Long-distance precision work. Split-second decision-making under extreme pressure. The kind of skills that someone trains for in programs like BUD-ES. Rachel felt pieces clicking together in her mind. You're talking about counter-sniper work. Among other things. We're talking about protective details that can operate at the highest levels of government while maintaining complete deniability. Teams that officially don't exist, but unofficially keep very important people alive. The conversation continued for another hour, Diana carefully outlining an opportunity that existed in the shadowy space between official government agencies. A program that recruited from the highest levels of military and law enforcement, that handled protective assignments too sensitive for traditional Secret Service details, that operated with resources and authorities that conventional agencies couldn't access. The work is challenging, Diana concluded. High stress, irregular hours, constant travel. The pay is significantly better than military compensation, but that's not typically why people join. They join because the work matters, and because very few people have the qualifications to do it. Rachel considered everything she'd heard, weighing it against the alternatives she'd been offered within the Navy. What would be required of me? 6 months of specialized training. Marksmanship, close protection protocols, threat assessment. Emergency medical response. You'd be based in Washington, but travel extensively. Your military record would be flagged as classified reassignment, not erased, but not publicly accessible. And after the training, you'd be assigned to a team responsible for protecting high-value targets. Senators, cabinet members, visiting. Dignitaries, occasionally private citizens whose safety impacts national security. You'd be the person watching for the threats that others can't see or can't respond to. Diana reached into her briefcase and produced a thick envelope. This contains more detailed information about the program, including compensation and training. Requirements. Take it home, review it carefully, and call me within 48 hours with your decision. She stood, leaving money on the table for both their coffees. Rachel, I've read your file. Your SEAL instructors all noted the same thing. You have exceptional situational awareness and decision-making ability under pressure. Those are rare traits that can't be taught. The physical requirements that ended your SEAL career aren't relevant to this work. How do you know about my SEAL evaluation? Deanna smiled, the expression not entirely reassuring. Because we know about everything relevant to our recruiting decisions. The question isn't what we know about you, it's whether you're ready to learn what you're really capable of. As Diana walked away, Rachel sat alone with the envelope and her thoughts. Around her, harbor lights continued its normal morning rhythm of caffeine and conversation. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, while she contemplated stepping into something far from ordinary. That evening, she opened the envelope in her apartment and spread its contents across her kitchen table. Training schedules, organizational charts that showed relationships between agencies she'd heard of and several she hadn't. Compensation packages that were indeed significantly better than military pay, and a detailed job description that read like something from a thriller novel. One section caught her attention. Protective specialists are expected to make life or death decisions with incomplete information under extreme time pressure. Previous military experience in high-stress environments is essential, as is demonstrated ability to function independently while maintaining team cohesion. It was exactly the kind of challenge she had been seeking when she attempted SEAL training. Different methodology, different environment, but the same fundamental requirement. Be the person others can count on when everything goes wrong. Rachel spent most of the night reviewing the materials, then called Diana Morrison exactly 36 hours. After their meeting, "I'm in," she said when Diana answered. "Excellent. Report to the address I'm about to give you on Monday morning at 08:00. Bring military fitness gear and civilian professional clothes. Leave your cell phone at home. You'll be issued new communication equipment." "One question," Rachel said. "This program, does it have a name? Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, we call it the Aegis Project, named after the shield that protected Zeus. Our job is to be the shield that protects those who protect democracy." The line went dead, and Rachel found herself staring at a future that was suddenly filled with possibility again. She had failed at becoming a Navy SEAL, but perhaps that failure had been necessary to prepare her for something else entirely, something that would soon test every skill she had learned and several she had yet to discover. Outside her window, the lights of Virginia Beach twinkled like stars, and for the first time in weeks, Rachel Torres felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The Aegis Project training facility existed in a place that didn't appear on any maps, tucked into 2,000 acres of Virginia countryside that officially belonged to the Department of Agriculture. Rachel arrived on a Monday morning to find herself among 12 other recruits, each carrying their own story of exceptional military or law enforcement service and subsequent redirection into this shadow world of deniable protection. Her fellow trainees included a former Delta Force operator whose knee injury had ended his combat career, a Secret Service agent who had asked too many questions about agency protocols, and a Marine Scout sniper whose psychological evaluation had deemed her too independent for traditional command structure. All of them shared the same look: competent professionals who had found their original paths blocked and were now seeking a new way to serve. The training was unlike anything Rachel had experienced, even in her abbreviated SEAL program, where Buddes had focused on breaking candidates down to build them back up as team members. Aegis training assumed you were already broken and rebuilt you as something else entirely. A protector who could think independently while serving a larger mission. A guardian who could make split-second decisions that balanced multiple lives against uncertain outcomes. Diana Morrison appeared on the third day, observing from the sidelines, as Rachel worked through a complex marksmanship scenario. The target setup required engaging multiple threats at varying distances while protecting a simulated principal, all within a crowded urban environment populated by innocent bystanders. "Interesting approach," Diana commented as Rachel completed the exercise. Most shooters would have taken the 300-yard shot first, biggest threat, clearest target. The 300-yard target had civilians in the background arc. Rachel replied, checking her rifle's safety before setting it aside. The close-range threat had a clear backdrop. Tactical priority changes when collateral damage becomes a factor. And if the close-range threat had gotten a shot off while you were engaging the distant target? Rachel considered the question seriously. Then I would have failed the principle and lived with that failure. But at least I wouldn't have lived with killing an innocent person. Diana nodded approvingly. That's the kind of thinking that makes someone suitable for this work. The ability to accept personal risk in service of the larger mission. The training intensified over the following months. Precision shooting at ranges that pushed the limits of human capability and equipment performance. Close protection scenarios that required instant threat assessment and response. Emergency medical training that prepared them to keep someone alive under the worst possible circumstances. Most challenging of all, psychological conditioning that taught them to function normally in civilian environments while maintaining constant readiness for violence. Rachel excelled at the marksmanship components, her steady hands and analytical mind proving ideally suited for the complex calculations required for extreme distance precision work. By the end of 6 months, she could consistently hit targets at 1,200 yards under varying weather conditions, and had demonstrated the ability to make precise shots in urban environments where the margin for error was measured in inches rather than feet. Her first assignment came 3 weeks after graduation. Protective detail for Senator Catherine Brennan, a former federal prosecutor who had made powerful enemies investigating defense contractor fraud. Brennan was scheduled to speak at a Veterans Advocacy Conference in downtown Denver, an event that had drawn specific intelligence concerns about potential threats. The security setup was layered and complex. Official Secret Service protection handled close-in security and venue control. Local law enforcement managed outer perimeters and crowd control. The Aegis team, officially invisible, positioned themselves to handle threats that might emerge beyond the reach of conventional protection. Rachel found herself on the roof of a building 8 blocks from the convention center, equipped with a custom rifle system that could reach targets at distances the Secret Service couldn't cover. Her position gave her overwatch of multiple approach routes while remaining completely invisible to official security protocols. Overwatch 1, this is control, came the voice through her earpiece as Senator Brennan's motorcade approached the venue. Intelligence update indicates possible sniper threat from elevated positions. Eyes sharp. Rachel adjusted her scope, scanning the windows and rooftops within her area of responsibility. The morning sun created challenging lighting conditions, with deep shadows and bright reflections that could conceal threats or create false positives. She worked systematically through her sectors, looking for anything that didn't belong in the urban landscape. Movement in the Riverside Tower, 20th floor. Southeast corner window, she reported, her voice calm despite the spike of adrenaline. Subject appears to be setting up equipment. Through her scope, Rachel watched a figure in dark clothing assembling what was clearly a rifle system. The distance was extreme, 1,347 yards, according to her rangefinder, and the target was partially concealed by window glass and structural elements. Worse, the angle meant that any shot would pass directly over a busy street filled with innocent civilians. Control, Overwatch 1. Confirmed sniper threat, Riverside Tower. Target is in position and appears to be tracking the principal's vehicle. Copy, Overwatch 1. Official units are 10 minutes out from that location. Can you neutralize? Rachel ran the calculations in her mind with the speed that months of training had made automatic. Distance, wind conditions, elevation differential, target movement, background considerations. The shot was possible but represented the extreme edge of what was achievable under current conditions. It's a low probability shot, she reported. Long distance, partial concealment, civilian considerations, but it's doable. Below, Senator Brennan's motorcade had arrived at the convention center. Through her scope, Rachel could see the senator emerging from her vehicle, surrounded by Secret Service agents who had no idea that a rifle was trained on them from nearly 3/4 of a mile away. Control, subject has acquired target. I need authorization for the shot. The pause that followed lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but felt eternal. Rachel maintained her sight picture, watching the distant figure adjust his position for what was clearly a final targeting sequence. Her breathing had automatically slowed to the rhythm that preceded precision shooting, her heart rate dropping as her body prepared for the task ahead. Overwatch 1, you are authorized. Take the shot. Rachel made her final calculations, accounting for the slight crosswind that had developed and the way morning thermals might affect bullet trajectory over such an extreme distance. The target's position meant she would have to thread the needle between structural elements while compensating for window glass that might deflect her bullet. She exhaled halfway and held her breath, her finger finding the familiar resistance of the trigger's first stage. Through her scope, she watched the distant figure settle into what was unmistakably a final firing position. The shot broke clean and smooth, the rifle's recoil familiar and controlled. Rachel maintained her sight picture long enough to observe the bullet's impact before immediately beginning to scan for additional threats. Through her scope, she saw the figure in the Riverside Tower collapse backward, his weapon falling away. From the window, Control, Overwatch 1, target down. Continuing Overwatch for additional threats. Copy, Overwatch 1, outstanding work. Official units are moving to secure the location. Below, Senator Brennan continued her approach to the convention center, completely unaware that her life had just been saved by a shot fired from over 1,300 yards, away by a woman who had been deemed unfit for Navy SEAL service less than 2 years earlier. The debriefing took place 6 hours later in a nondescript office building in downtown Denver. Diana Morrison had flown in personally to conduct the after-action review, her expression revealing nothing as she reviewed Rachel's detailed account of the engagement. The shot placement was precise, Diana noted, studying crime scene photographs. Single round through the upper torso, immediate incapacitation. No collateral damage despite the challenging environment. The target's position made a headshot too risky, Rachel explained. Window glass could have caused deflection, and the angles meant torso presentation was larger and more reliable. And you're confident in your threat assessment? That this individual posed an imminent danger to the principal? Rachel nodded without hesitation. He had a clear line of sight to the convention center entrance, was using professional-grade equipment, and had timed his positioning to coincide with the senator's arrival. Intent was obvious from his behavior pattern. Deanna closed the file and studied Rachel with the same appraising look she had worn during their first meeting. Official after-action reports will show that local SWAT neutralized a potential threat. During a routine security sweep, your name won't appear anywhere in any documentation. I understand, do you? Because what you did today, that shot, under those conditions, with that pressure, that's the kind of work that stays with you. Not because of guilt, but because you'll know for the rest of your life that you're capable of performing at that level when it matters most. Rachel considered Diana's words as she packed her equipment. The shot had indeed been at the extreme edge of what was possible, requiring every skill she had developed during her military service and Aegis training. But it had also felt natural, like the culmination of everything she had been preparing. For without knowing it, Senator Brennan will never know what happened today, Diana continued. She'll give her speech, continue her work investigating corruption, and live her life completely unaware that it nearly ended on a downtown Denver rooftop. That's how it should be, Rachel replied. The best protection is the kind people never have to think about. 3 months later, Rachel received a package at her new apartment in Arlington, Virginia. Inside was a simple wooden box containing a single spent cartridge case and a handwritten note from Senator Brennan that read, "Thank you for your service to our country. Some debts can never be repaid, only honored." Attached was a newspaper clipping about the passage of new legislation strengthening oversight of defense contractors. Legislation that Senator Brennan had championed and that might never have become law if not for a single impossible shot fired by a woman who had been told she wasn't tough enough for special operations. Rachel placed the cartridge case on her mantel next to her father's Vietnam service medals and her own military commendations. 3 different generations, 3 different wars, 3 different ways of serving the same cause. Her father had been right about the hardest targets being worth taking. Sometimes you just had to find the right angle of approach. Outside her window, Washington, D.C. hummed with the business of democracy, protected by layers of security, both visible and invisible. Rachel Torres, former Navy SEAL failure, current Aegis operative, prepared for her next assignment, knowing that she had finally found her place in the world, the place where impossible shots became possible when the mission demanded it, the place where failure became the foundation for a different kind of success, the place where a woman who couldn't quite become a Navy SEAL had become something else entirely, a guardian who watched from the shadows and took the shots that others couldn't take, ensuring that democracy continued its messy, vital work another day. In a world full of hidden stories and quiet heroes, Rachel Torres had written herself into both categories with a single pull of a trigger at 1,347 yards on a sunny morning in Denver. The shot that changed everything, fired by someone who had learned that sometimes the most important victories come after what looks like defeat. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.